Wednesday, November 6, 2019, and here's what's coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Roland is off today, and I'm Dr. Avis. It's post-election day 2019, and a lot has changed. We'll give you the roundup, starting with a huge upset in Kentucky. Democrat Beshear beats Republican Bevin despite Trump's last-minute push. Also in Kentucky, Daniel Cameron becomes the first Black Attorney General and first Republican to hold that position in more than 70 years. Houston is headed for a mayoral runoff, and Pennsylvania has a blue wave. Also, Flint has a new mayor. And DNC President Tom Perez says the Latino vote is critical in the 2020 elections. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more deeply. Plus, remember, the woman who lost her job for flipping off the Trump motorcade, well, she just won an election last night. And an update to a story we brought you yesterday, Kansas City overwhelmingly votes to remove Martin Luther King's sign from a historic street. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now. Martin.
So we're talking about the results of yesterday's elections today. And joining me for the conversation is A. Scott Bolden, former chair of the National Bar Association PAC, Michael Brown, former vice chair of the DNC Finance Committee, and legal analyst, and Lauren Victoria Burke with the National Newspapers Publishers Association. First up, Kentucky. Democrat Andy Beshear beat Republican incumbent Governor Matt Bevin in the Kentucky governor's race. This is big news because Donald Trump won that state by 30 percentage points in 2016 and made a last-minute campaign speech for Bevin the night before. Here's an excerpt from Beshear's victory speech.
Tonight, voters in Kentucky sent a message loud and clear for everyone to hear. It's a message that says our elections don't have to be about right versus left. They are still about right versus wrong. That our values and how we treat each other is still more important than our party. That what unites us as Kentuckians is still stronger than any national divisions. And tonight, I think we showed this country that in Kentucky, we can disagree with each other while still respecting one another. In this Commonwealth, a Commonwealth that I love, we believe in lifting each other up instead of tearing each other down.
So I guess the whole Trump magic fell on its face yesterday. Lauren, what do you think about now we have a Democratic governor in Kentucky, something that most people would be surprised to see, but there are some extenuating circumstances here, right?
Well, I mean, the president's numbers, the president's dragging the party down. He's dragging his party down. For the first time, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we found out in the polls that most Americans want him to be, are okay with him being impeached from office. Obviously, that's going to have an impact on the party at some point. You got the fact that in Kentucky, of course, health care is a huge issue that has not really been completely dealt with. They have a senator, of course, Mitch McConnell, who they see on TV every day, who does absolutely nothing for them on that issue. It was bound to catch up with them, and it did last night.
Absolutely. And so the outgoing governor, is my understanding, has a really horrible reputation in the state. You know, to say the least, he's almost sort of patterned himself as somewhat of a mini Trump. Yep. That didn't quite work, did it?
Nope.
No. Kentucky voters rejected is it Bevins, I think?
Yes.
And he not only aligned himself with Trump, but very often he sounded like Trump. Not only do they have the issues with expanded Medicare, or Medicaid rather, that the governor was against, but the governor had issues with the teachers and blocking their raise. Beshear ran on getting a $2,000 increase for the teachers at first blush starting in January, whenever his term starts. And so you had the negative campaigning, you had the Trump factor, because Trump was there 24 hours before the voting. And I think Beshear's speech, he was talking to that audience, but he was also talking to the GOP. He was talking to Trump. Look at how he was saying good versus evil, or whatever. He had a great line in there Michael and I were talking about. It's not about right versus left. It's about right versus wrong, or something like that. And so this is a big boom to the Republican Party, whether they don't tone it down or not, because you don't get much redder than the Kentucky. And Trump even linked the governor's race to his back. If you lose, if you don't vote for the Republican end, they're going to say that I failed. You can't let that happen. But, Mr. President, you certainly failed.
Yeah, everything's always about him. What are your thoughts?
His demise now.
Absolutely.
It's always to his demise.
So what should the Democrats writ large take from this victory? Is there particular type of sort of talking points that Democrats across the nation should sort of begin to sort of put inside of their campaigns as we move towards the 2020 election?
Besides joy, obviously very happy about the results. Also in Virginia. I don't know if you were going to talk about Virginia.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get to that's my
Okay, sorry.
Another bull.
Absolutely. I think what it says to the electorate and to the candidates in the 2020 on the Democratic side is really going super duper left the way to win. And because
is it or is it not?
I don't think it is. And it'll be interesting to see. I don't think it's going to change Senator Warren's platform. She's going to run the way she's running. It's not going to change Senator Sanders. But for Mayor Pete and Senator Biden, or Vice President Biden and potentially Senator Harris, maybe they say, hey, maybe the middle is the place to be. But there's so many different challenges with that. I don't know if I buy into, people won't be excited. The challenge for Democrats, and Scott knows because I have to go back to when my father was chair, because he did it the right way. There's nothing wrong with having these aggressive primaries, but at some point, you got to cut it off.
Yeah.
One of the reasons Secretary Clinton lost was the Bernie people were still pissed at the convention.
Oh, yeah.
And that only gave Secretary Clinton 2.5 months to battle 45.
Absolutely.
You got to cut. And what he did, and remember, so people say,
they begrudgingly came along even after that.
And
some never did. Some never did.
Never Clintonites.
You got to have the time to recover. So you have to go in through the summer with momentum, go to the convention with momentum, then you leapfrog to the general. And people can't use the argument, there weren't heavyweights. No, heavyweights, Harkin, Rockefeller, Gore, Clinton, Gebhardt, those are some heavyweights.
Yeah,
but you're not suggesting that you run the same way in Kentucky a candidate would run in California, for example.
No, but I think there are really only 5 states that matter. The Electoral College is the Electoral College. Clearly, so there's some toss-ups. I don't even put Florida in that, because Florida goes back and forth. Democrats have to get Pennsylvania back. There's no excuse to lose Michigan. And you got to win Wisconsin.
You got to go to Wisconsin.
You got to go to Wisconsin. And then if you get Arizona, great. But those you got to get that blue wall back.
But what is exciting
and so the
to
messaging,
me,
then the messaging is more that middle of the road messaging, not the far left where everything's for free.
But what's interesting to me is that this is Kentucky. And I feel like this is just the first in a breakthrough of really being able to flip the South. I think that if Kentucky can go down in this way, and I know it was just the governor and not all these other statewide positions, but I do think, are we that far away from being able to count Georgia as a possibility in a presidential election? Are we that far away from being able to count Texas as a possibility in a presidential election? I mean, really, are we that far away from even maybe being able to count Kentucky in 2020? This to me makes us think maybe we can broaden this map if we are strategic about really courting our base with half the fervency that Trump courts his base. What do you think about that, Lauren?
I don't think it's a map broadener. I don't think that these moments really can be templated onto anything else, even though we would like to do that. I do think it's episodic. So it's the candidates you're dealing with on the ballot at that time on that election day. I don't think it translates into anything else. Of course, we've been talking about Georgia for a while. If you could fix voter suppression, you'd be okay there probably. I mean, we would have, Stacey Abrams in there today. So that probably should have happened. Texas, of course, is really contingent on how much we can get the Hispanic vote out there actually voting, and their numbers would tell you that that should have happened already. But once again, these are states where Republicans like to make it very difficult for people to register and vote, and come up with ways to block them here and there. So I don't think it's I do think it's the fact that this particular candidate, this particular time is very good, and you have this thing in the background. The backdrop of Donald Trump cannot be ignored. And I think that was a huge factor in this.
And Trump drives that narrative.
Yeah.
And I do think that this narrative of Donald Trump, this negative narrative that he keeps driving to energize his base, whenever he talks about immigration, whenever he makes racist statements, whenever he lies, the 13,000 in the last 3 years, whatever that does to energize his base, that energizes the Democrats.
Right.
Because if you look at what happened in 2018, and 2019, it may be episodic, but it's a lot of episodes. and we're seeing a pattern here.
Yeah, the turnout was amazing.
That Dems, who are centrists in some of these red states, are making progress. They're getting just enough, maybe more than enough, in their elections, which kind of handcuffs them to how they lead, perhaps, because it's nice that they win. But if you take the House and Senate in the state of Virginia, those are really tight races that they won. Don't expect the far left, Bernie Sanders supporters and Elizabeth Warren supporters to be bringing forth legislation that's going to be far left, because they still have to manage that population. And that population, I think, in these states, Kentucky, Virginia, and a few other places, these are moderate Republicans. If you look at the Midwest and the South, respect and honor and integrity means something. They know Donald Trump's Republican Party is not their Republican Party. Now, some jump on board when they get energized and so forth and so on. But when you go far right, when you are Trump no matter what, and you make excuses for him, what you're seeing in the Midwest and the South is that matters to people who are on the GOP side in some of these moderate or centrist red states, if you will. And so it's important to watch it. We got to keep watching it. But, I think the Hispanic vote and the black vote on the Democratic side, if they treat them like they got some sense and really get them out and speak to their message, all of this is possible.
We've already really quickly before we move on to the next one, Mike, you brought up this issue about the whole thing about going too far with healthcare. And what I find very interesting is now, Obamacare is as popular as it's ever been.
The Medicaid
exactly. Is it, does it make strategic sense to, in essence, say, chuck that and let's start all over?
Well, after what happened last night, probably not. But, obviously you have to run all over the country. People have their own principles and their own values. But it just makes sense what Vice President Biden and what Mayor Pete are talking about is, yes, nothing wrong. If you Medicare, if you need it, it's there for you. But if you want to keep your private insurance, keep it. I mean, it's a more practical message. I get we want to make sure that everyone's taken care of, and obviously that price tag on Senator Warren's health care bill, I mean, it's enormous, and there's really no real answer except taxing the rich. I mean, I understand that's the easy thing to do. Democrats have been.
Well, that's what she wants to do.
Right, I mean, we've been doing
middle income.
Right. I don't know how you do that. It's almost impossible.
Well, we've been giving them a tax cut for quite a while.
Take that back, and then she wants
tax rates.
Absolutely, and then she wants to add on extra wealth tax to billionaires. But let's move on to the next story. Also in Kentucky, Republican Daniel Cameron became the state's first black attorney general and the first Republican elected in that position for more than 70 years. Now, this is very interesting to me. Am I wrong to say a pattern here? And maybe I'm wrong, because I haven't really just counted the numbers on it. But it does, to me, seem like black Republicans running statewide tend to be a little bit more successful than Democratic Republicans running, Democratic black people running statewide. Am I wrong with that? And if so, what's going on? Are Republicans sort of giving those campaigns more support than Democrats are? Or is this just in my head?
Sometimes. I mean, in a red state, whoever has the R next to their name is going to get the votes, period. And so
Regardless
black
of
candidate, yeah, regardless of race. So, black candidate in a red state is probably going to get elected. And frankly, it gives white voters a rare opportunity to support somebody black in a party that is often accused of.
Even if it's based on guilt.
Right, exactly. But
guilt
so
vote.
much of our electorate is sort of just, rinse and repeat. I mean, you've got that 45% in each state that is voting for party no matter who, no matter what the name is. And we've seen some really interesting examples of that, including Donald Trump. Yeah. And even though Donald Trump, of course, got 3 million votes, almost 3 million votes less than Hillary, that's just sort of an automatic pilot. So I think black Republican statewide,
In red states.
To be honest, I think the Democratic Party sometimes mishandles black candidates that want to run statewide.
Yes,
So you don't
that's
see
what
the
I'm getting
opportunity on the Democratic side that you see on the Republican side.
Exactly.
Because the Republicans see it as there's an opportunity to maybe message to a group that we haven't been getting to.
Right.
So let's put this black candidate up. Democrats don't see it that way. Democrats tend to take for granted black candidates.
Right.
Because it's just, you guys are going to vote for us 90%, so we don't really have to do too much of anything. It's all that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think black Republican candidates are blessed by the GOP. That the messaging is to their GOP members in that state that we have blessed this black candidate. He's a strong candidate. It's okay to vote for him. And then they give that person all the resources. Now, with the black Attorney General for Kentucky, he was a former lawyer, general counsel for McConnell. That certainly doesn't hurt.
Certainly doesn't.
And it certainly doesn't help it certainly doesn't hurt his GOP bona fides. And while he supported Trump's anti-immigration plan and a few other signature issues that Trump has been promoting and speaking negatively upon, he embraced that enough, even though he didn't run as being more Trump-like than Trump did. I think that helped him a lot. I think the McConnell machine helped him a lot. I think all of these cases are case-by-case basis. It's interesting that healthcare, teachers, education, in this big blue wave yesterday, were not only local issues, but national issues.
Yes.
So when the local issues match up with the national issues, then Republicans want you to be pro-Trump, and they have a messaging system they want you to follow. But if it's purely local issues, like a lot in Virginia that is now a blue state, then you still got to run on local issues. You still got to connect with the voters, and they still, in the end, have to like you. They have to still want to have a beer with you. And some of the upsets we saw yesterday was just hard, on the ground campaigning and connecting with people, the Somalian candidates and some of the other jurisdictions.
Right.
And so I still think all politics is still local in the end. It may mix it up a few times, but in the end, people care about what's happening locally with them.
So what do you think about how the DNC is doing versus the RNC with really accelerating the rise of black candidates at very high levels, state levels and up?
Well, first, congratulations to the Attorney General-elect. I mean, it's a great achievement, clearly.
Absolutely. History making.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Tim Scott had won, obviously, and doing this in the South, so it's even more impressive. But let's not read too much into it. There are thousands of African-American elected leaders in this country. And you can count on probably two hands how many there are from the GOP side, whether statewide, district-wide, or whatever. So it's impressive. But if you're still going to endorse the policies of the Trump GOP party, 45's party, it doesn't matter what color you are. If you're supporting things that are racist, it does. You lose all the credibility. So congratulations, glad you won, impressive. But let's not read too much into it.
You're not going to see him to promote Medicare for all.
I don't see him doing it.
Somehow I don't either.
Going up there.
Exactly. So here's your story, A. Scott. You've been waiting for this one.
Okay.
The other huge story was Virginia's state legislature elections, where Democrats flipped both the state House and the Senate, ensuring a trifecta with Ralph Northam, Democrat, already in the governor's mansion, as well as Justin Fairfax as lieutenant governor. So there is like a clean sweep in Virginia right now. Blue all up and down the ticket. What does this tell us about Virginia politics moving forward, Lauren?
Well, it tells us that the wave that came in 2017 has continued. I mean, the 15 people who were elected in 2017 got elected last night. So, full disclosure, I'm a consultant for Justin Fairfax, so I'm a little bit, and my mother's from Virginia, so I'm a little bit more involved in Virginia than most people. But I would say that this is a situation where when you see something, a legislature flip for the first time, I think it was 29 years? Which
Yeah,
it's been
over 20 years. Absolutely.
It did not hit me until last night. I mean, a sort of historic flip would tell you that obviously the Republican Party is in huge trouble right, going into 2020. But specifically in Virginia, they haven't elected a Republican since 2009. When they did, it was a moderate Republican, Bob
Republican
McDonnell.
for what office?
For governor?
For governor.
For governor, okay.
So it was, you can see that they are underwater, and they, they've had people on the ballot who've frankly been a disaster. And so Virginia, I mean, Virginia was spectacular last night. And I was in Richmond last night with Justin, and we couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
We could not believe what happened. I would also say, too, a friend of mine, LaSharice Aird, is running to be Speaker of the House in Virginia. Be a black Speaker of the House, of course, the first in history in Commonwealth. That'd be very exciting. She's going up against some folks that are a little bit more senior, but who cares? She should go for it. And we'll see what happens. I just think I'm a little bit dizzy, as you can tell. Just thinking about the 29 years is awesome.
Yeah, it is.
It is pretty amazing. But I think what it shows globally, even though I do think these things still are episodic, is that the Republican Party is in trouble. They do have to have a realignment related to the fact that Donald Trump has taken them in directions that I think a lot of them didn't want to go. And when you see people like George Will leaving the party and that type of thing, and nobody's really addressing that, and of course the president is on the brink of being impeached, the party is going to have to look itself in the mirror at some point. They're going to have to make a readjustment, the type of which they saw when Barry Goldwater was around, and get out of this cycle of making a sort of racial argument that was in the undertow before Trump, and Trump put it right on Front Street when he got there, and they've got to have a reckoning with that. And I think this is part of that process. When you start losing, like they lost last night, when parties lose like this, they tend to figure out, we got to figure out a new way of doing things. So we'll see what happens next.
And remember, we had Charlottesville. Remember Charlottesville in Virginia?
Which was stunning.
It's been turning blue, but
right.
this was a double boom to the GOP.
Right.
But here's the power and the problem that the Democrats are going to have in Virginia. The power is that they control all three houses, right?
Right.
They may be the 28th or 29th state to endorse the ERA, even though that extended itself, or they gave a 1982 limit on it. The House and the Senate Dems at the federal level could certainly reverse that, and then the ERA, equal pay for men and women, would be there. The gun control laws that have always been held up may have an opportunity to pass now, which they ought to be certainly looking at it. And the other issues, whether it's education or health care, they expanded Medicaid with the help of your client, for sure. He gave the deciding vote. And so the power is there. That being said, how far left can they go? Because, again, these were centrist Democrats that were there. They've got to represent a population that's a moderate Democrat, and most of them are moderate Democrats and Republicans. The problem, what does this mean for next year when the governor's race, lieutenant governor's race, is up? Who runs? Does Terry McAuliffe run?
2021.
2021, I'm sorry. What does this do for 2 years, in 2 years? The other thing is this. The GOP's been in power for 25, 26 years because the House Virginia Dems are going to do the voting,
Redistricting.
the redistricting.
Yeah.
And historically, the Republicans have gerrymandered the mess out of it, where it's diluted the black vote. The Supreme Court agreed, actually, and so they got to go back to the drawing board. So you have all these moving parts. The Democrats have the power, but they've got to do it the right way. And these elections in 2021 are going to be a test for the Democrats. Do they keep control of all three houses, right? And match up with the interests of those Virginia voters who took a shot with them over the GOP, or do they make history in 2 years if they remake their party and take one of those houses
It
back.
looks like they got 55-45 in the House and it's 21-19 in the Senate. The House being 55 is a little
That's
bit
pretty good.
surprising. He had to probably keep that a
it
few
is.
cycles.
Yeah, but the Senate is only 2
Right.
races, and so
Right.
we got to be careful. The Democrats can
pendulum
rush
will
in
swing back.
and say we're going to do all these things,
Right.
but they got to be careful because they have to. As Nancy Pelosi tried to protect her moderate Democrats for the majority in the House, the Virginia state Dems have to do the same thing, and so we'll just have to keep watching.
Here's the thing that gets me, though. When Republicans take power, they take power.
They don't worry about
take
nothing, right?
power.
I know, right?
And
I know.
they
Naked
make what
power.
they want
That's right.
happen. And part of me wants to say, bump that. We have power.
Right.
And there are things that we want to do that your constituency voted for you to do, and now is the time to do it instead of walking around like a little mouse and you're afraid to do what you were elected to do. That, to me, is probably a risk of a turnoff for people in that direction.
Yeah, but the Dems are always want to win the debate, and the Republicans want to win the vote.
Yeah, which is
Gangster
we got to
like
get
or
over
not.
that. We got to get over that.
Got to get over that. I think you're right about that.
Yeah.
I think they ought to go for it. But at the same time, I do think there's going to be some concern. Can they maintain?
They'll go
Because
for
the
it.
power is to maintain it.
They'll go
Right.
for it.
Well, Mike, here's the thing. Now, we know that, as was mentioned, this is such a cataclysmic change because they were running under district lines that were drawn by Republicans. So they really had to overperform in terms of turnout, in terms of the electoral size of victory in order to be able to take over the Senate and the House. Now, they did this despite the fact, you had Trump in Kentucky, but you also had Pence in Virginia. And still they lost, right? The Republicans lost. So what do you think? Do you think that we're maybe underestimating how blue Virginia really is right now?
Well, it's like anything else. The results are what matter. You really aren't blue until you're blue.
Right.
And now that you're blue, now you can act like you're blue, to your point, to use the power. I just find what's happening in Virginia very interesting. It's both with suburban Maryland and Northern Virginia. It's almost becoming, and I know the folks down in Tidewater don't want to hear this,
Yeah.
but the tail that's wagging the dog is Northern Virginia.
That's true.
And it's just changing so much. The population is exploding. It's diverse.
Yes.
And it's more than the rural votes can catch up on. And frankly, it'll be interesting to see over the next 5-10 years where the candidates come from for statewide office in Virginia. Where they're coming from Northern Virginia
Yeah.
or from Richmond, which is certainly fine, where they've come from traditionally. Doug Wilder, obviously Richmond. But Northern Virginia, suburban Maryland are just reaping the benefits of diversity and population.
Yeah.
And it's going to be interesting to see how it
And
continues.
activism. The
And
Dems are voting.
very active.
They're voting.
Northern Virginia lost their last Republican in this area, Tim
Correct.
Hugo.
Was it Fairfax?
No, Tim Hugo.
Was he in Fairfax?
Yeah, I think no.
Oh, he wasn't?
Yeah, no, he might have been. I'd have to look at the
So I
map.
wonder what the
But-
NRA is going to do now that they're in Fairfax. They're going to move?
But yeah, how about that?
Their
But
snow's not going to get plowed?
right. But basically,
They were outspent in this yesterday.
were. The NRA
for these
was outspent.
elections. They were outspent for the first time
That's
in
rare.
forever. So maybe they took it for
Absolutely.
granted, maybe they didn't, but they got outspent and they lost. And
One
watch
last
these
thing.
gun control laws move.
Absolutely. And
Watch
one
that
last
movie.
thing
Before
about
your
the,
last
yeah.
thing, what I find interesting too
Yeah.
is with all the drama that happened with the governor,
it meant
lieutenant
nothing.
governor, attorney general, they
It meant
overcame
nothing.
all
All
of
of
that.
it.
Right. And
All
not
of it.
only that, Ralph Northam now is in a more. This is what happens when people rush. Don't wait, right?
judgment?
So yeah, well, actually, I think the talking head class believed, right? Oh my God, this is going to affect the elections. Well, it didn't. And
Yeah.
now Ralph is in a more powerful position than he ever was
He
the
is.
entire time.
Absolutely, and just really
Majority.
super quickly.
It's amazing.
One thing I think we also need to keep in mind with this, and also in other spaces, when people talk about the power of the suburban vote, but particularly as you look into Northern Virginia, to your point, Mike, it's a very diverse vote. I think oftentimes when people hear that, they see it as a nod towards white suburban moms. Now, if you're talking about suburban Northern Virginia, you're talking about a lot of black and brown folks. So I
Well,
think that's
Virginia
important.
is Richmond,
we need to
and
do
Hampton
that.
Roads, and Nova are the three areas where all the votes are coming from the Democratic
Absolutely.
Party. And
But
it's all
the
Absolutely.
GOP is even
Yeah.
losing the suburban voters, however you define them,
Yeah.
where there are not a lot of black and brown people. If you
like,
look at
like the Loudon race.
the Loudon race, for example,
They have found a way to
Right.
turn off a lot of
60%
people.
Exactly.
right.
against John Whitbeck.
So we have to move on.
Exactly.
So we have to move on. In Texas, Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner heads for a December runoff with multi-millionaire trial attorney Tony Busby. And in Michigan, Monique Owens makes history by becoming the first black mayor of East Point. Owens is a former Detroit Police Department officer, 11-year sheriff's deputy, community volunteer, and was a member of East Point's city council. You know, these two mayoral elections we were talking about before statewide, but local politics is critically important, right? I mean, some people would say the closer that it is to you, the more important it is. So, you know, as we're seeing these close elections, but also these victories around the nation with black elected officials, it's really great to see this local power rising up. And once again, in these very diverse areas. What are your thoughts about where we're going now in terms of growing black political power at the grassroots level and a little bit up from there?
Well, local politics, of course, is everything. I'm not really versed on this specific race. It's not something that I've followed, so I'm going to let Scott
Well,
talk.
what's interesting about the East Point race is that she was an incumbent who had served on the city council. That's the first thing. And secondly, what's interesting about East Point is that it's one of the few areas where DOJ has gone in and said you have to redraw your maps because you put all the African-American voters in one part of East Point, if you will, and you have to redraw those lines. And DOJ has been aggressively prosecuting that claim. So that's a district that has to be redrawn. It said that African-Americans could never be elected. Well, her race in East Point as the new mayor kind of throws a wrench in that, but that only focused on the city council races. And so we'll have to continue to look at that. But you remember all those local races we lost under the 8 years of Barack Obama? And we did lose them, right?
Yes, we did.
In the last, since the Republicans doing 2016, we've won a lot of those local races back. And once we win those local races back, the real tsunami that it feels like, blue wave in 2020, feels like it's very realistic. You gotta remember, the president only won by 66,000 votes to get those electoral votes in those 3 states. That was Michigan, Pennsylvania, which is unheard of, and then Wisconsin. And so as we pick up these local races, you gotta believe. See, Trump can't grow from 40%. So the way he energizes his base is he wants more of his base to vote because he's not getting votes from the independents.
Right.
He's not getting votes from conservative Democrats. He's not getting votes from anybody else. And so he has decided to try to grow within that 40%.
Right.
All the Democrats have to do is vote.
Right.
And they have to vote not for a third-party candidate. Got to keep those out. And the Democrats have to vote in overwhelming numbers. That's black women, black people, and brown people. It doesn't look that hard. But we got to do our job as Democrats. And if we don't do our jobs, then the possibility of Trump's reelection comes into play.
Yeah, it's about energizing that vote, right?
And absolutely. But the face of, on the local, back to the local side, the face, different from obviously the 70s, 80s, obviously part of the 90s, is now the gentrification is happening in cities. Black candidates can't just win because black folks vote for them.
That's right.
Right.
You have to have a much more diverse message. So these candidates, it's much more impressive when you can win citywide because it's not like, oh, black folks, whoever the nominee is in the Democratic Party is going to win because it's going to get all the black votes.
Right.
Now, obviously, you have to go into other
broader message,
communities.
right.
Well, it's interesting.
Well, what's interesting-
Our last report that we did with the State of Black Women in America reports, where we looked at the black women who were part of the Congressional Black Caucus, they are actually more likely to be representing diverse districts where their districts are not majority black than black men who are elected to office. So it's something that black women, it seems, tend to be able to do as candidates when it comes to appealing to a more diverse electorate and being very successful and actually winning those victories. I mean, maybe there's some secret sauce there that they can
One of
share.
the biggest myths about the Black Caucus is that their seats are 80% and 90% black. But if you actually look at the group and the 55 members, there's a good 25 that are, you know, Maxine Waters' district,
Yeah.
Karen Bass's
Bishop.
District,
Yep.
Al
Georgia.
Green, Sheila Jackson Lee. They either have a majority Latino population. You've got Cleaver, you know, Manuel Cleaver has a majority white population. So you've got tons of members who have shown, black members of Congress who have shown that they can get white votes, other votes.
Does that mean that
Ilhan
race
Omar.
doesn't matter?
wouldn't say it
anymore
doesn't matter,
in
but certainly
politics and
what it
elections?
means is the Democratic Party needs to consider the fact that black elected officials can get voted by, they can get supported by anybody. I mean, it tends to be the sort of orthodoxy that every seat is like John Conyers' seat or something like that, where 80%. But Ilhan Omar and some of the people who have been elected by in districts of majority white.
Very diverse voting.
Yeah, yeah.
All blocks and stuff.
Yeah.
Or very diverse, like, AOC is a good example of this.
Exactly.
Her New York district is extremely diverse, and so you got to come with something more than just I'm black and I'm a pulse beat.
Right.
You got to entertain a lot of constituencies, and that's something
I'll
that.
tell you something else about local politics. If you're a black candidate, that does, with what you're saying,
Right.
if you're a black candidate, in a lot of jurisdictions, that doesn't guarantee you the black and brown vote either.
It doesn't, but I will say.
You like to think that, but it doesn't always mean that.
Well, in most cases, since most of the black voting population is voting Democrat, the voting for the Democrat Party, so it's like a 90% plus there. But it's sort of interesting just to watch the party, the way who they give money to and what they give money for.
Exactly where I want to go with that.
Because of course, if you bring that black voter to the polls, you're going to score almost 90% of the
Democratic
time.
vote.
Right, a Democratic vote. So it's always amazing to me how money is wasted on constituencies that aren't showing
But
up.
in the primary, you have black and white Dems running. And so under that scenario, it's interesting to look and see how black voters are voting in that scenario, because I think whether it's majority black districts or not, you can't take the black vote for granted if you're an African American candidate who's Democratic when you have brown and white candidates running in the same primary.
It's not just taking it for granted. The Democratic Party should be centering black voters. I'm telling you, that is the demographic group that if you get them there, they're going to vote for you. There is no other group that performs better, period. Black women is the #1 group. And you would think the spending would be going to that specifically. It almost never is. So that's something I know it comes up a lot. It never seems to get fixed. but it's
black women keep voting for them though, and get nothing for it.
Well,
What do we do about that? I mean, that's another debate.
well, no, we can have that debate. We can have that debate right now.
Well,
I
we
mean,
need to get something for them.
Yeah.
Black women, black men supporting black women need to get something for that loyalty to the Democratic Party.
how about
Yeah.
that?
And it just doesn't happen.
Well,
Well,
I guess their argument would be to clearly there needs to be more that we get for it that's specific to the black community. I 1,000% agree with you. But the reality is that adults make practical decisions between the options that are before them on the table. And if they know that the alternative would be worse, practical people will say, I will vote for the option that will help me maybe some, that will maybe do less damage, that will open up a little bit more opportunity than the option that I know will sink me and sink my family very quickly.
Yeah, but the DNC knows that the African American Democratic voter, especially in the last 3 years, but even longer than that, has no alternative.
Right.
And in the end, they're going to vote Democratic because what the Dems offer them policy-wise, the Republicans don't offer.
But that's not the reason they
but-
make the decision. The reason they make that decision is control. Control over the money to the vendors. Control over who gets what money when they're running for election. It's not about whether or not, I'm going to get you here. So you want to win. You want to be successful. The problem with the party is they want to win, but they don't want to empower the people that help them win.
Because
that's the problem.
they take that vote for granted
We're gonna
because
talk
they know
about
we
this
don't have an
more.
alternative.
I promise you, we're going to talk about this more when we talk about Tom Perez, because I got a word for him.
Yeah.
Okay?
I know you do.
We'll be back with more election analysis right after this.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it.
As the marijuana momentum continues, our good friends at marijuanastock.org have already reached more than half of their funding goal for the hemp CBD investment. That's right. If you want to take advantage of this great opportunity, you need to do it now because it won't last much longer. If you don't know, I'm talking about the hemp plant, the good cousin to marijuana with a much higher concentration of CBD. That means hemp gives you all the medical benefits of marijuana without getting you high. Also, if you don't know, hemp farming is now legal in the U.S., creating one of the largest commodities worldwide. It's just an incredible investment opportunity, and that's why our good friends at 420 Real Estate come in. Their business model is simple. They buy land that supports hemp CBD grow operations and lease it to licensed high-paying tenants. That's right, they are hemp CBD landlords, and you can get in on the action. As hemp continues to change the economic landscape, 420 Real Estate is allowing you to chase the American dream. The best part is right now you can invest in this crowdfunding campaign for as little as $200. That's right, $200 up to $10,000. Do it now before the fund is closed. To invest, go to marijuanastock.org. That's marijuanastock.org. Get in the game right now. Do it now. So, State Representative Sheldon Neely will be Flint's next mayor, beating incumbent Mayor Karen Weaver. Last night, Weaver had not conceded and would not rule out a recount. Here's Sheldon Neely.
You know, I first want to thank God, my family, my supporters, and the residents of the city of Flint. Also, all of those individuals who wanted us to unite this community under a new leadership, giving us a vision to move forward. And so, third time's a charm, but I'm here now. Well, we're going to be putting our transition team in place, making sure that we can provide services immediately for the residents of the city of Flint, putting people in a position that can provide a great level of service for the residents of the city of Flint, doing an operational audit, also a financial audit to see where we are, and then taking a look at where we're going to go from there. And the residents will always have a clear vision and path from what we're going to be doing, so they'll be able to take a look at where we're going. Transparency is important.
Well, it's certainly good to see that Flint has new leadership. We're hoping that this will help them sort of move forward, but they've been stuck with the same issue for years now, having toxic water. And it's really infuriating because it's like the nation has moved on, and we still have people in this country that cannot drink water that's coming out of their faucet, and also the reverberating impacts of people who are already poisoned and have to spend the rest of their lives, dealing with lead poisoning.
Yeah.
What can a mayor do under these circumstances?
He's got to do whatever. He's got to use his bullhorn or bully pulpit to amplify the issue as much as he can from that position. It's really difficult for a mayor to do. But it's such a ridiculous issue in terms of something that continues that hasn't been fixed.
Yeah.
This is the type of issue that, in my view, is one of the reasons why Trump ended up winning. When he was talking about America first, he was centering people in the country, not talking about foreign policy, not talking about anything else. I mean, obviously, there was certain obviously racial detrimental and racist aspects of that messaging, but I'm just saying that it was a rare thing to hear. And this is when you see an issue like that, you say to yourself, well, why is it that we can send billions to other countries and we can do all these other things, but we can't get the water right in a city in the United States? So it's going to be difficult because obviously all the oxygen in politics goes to Donald Trump every day on cable news, so it's difficult. But I think that's what he's going to end up having to do, Mayor-elect Neely.
Not only do we not get the water right, we send the governor of that state who oversaw this travesty, this human rights atrocity. He gets a Harvard appointment somewhere.
Yeah.
Must be nice to be a white boy in America.
Oh, gosh.
Amazing. Don't get me started.
Why are you looking at me? Well, you want me to go next? Okay,
Yes.
sure. All right. You looked
What do you
at me
think
and said it must be nice to be a white boy in America. This is a really difficult issue. I know a lot about this issue. In full disclosure, I represented the lead defendant in the criminal case down there early for a good period of time. And the criminal cases have been dismissed. The civil lawsuits, some have settled, some have not. The water has been changed years ago back to Lake Superior through an agreement with the Detroit government. The water's clean coming in, but the problem is that the pipes have been so damaged based on when it was coming out of the Flint River that they have to replace miles of piping now.
Oh my God.
For safe piping. Wow. The state legislature, while slow to do it, authorized a lot of money, millions of dollars to do it. It takes time to replace those pipes, so the water is still not the healthiest, no matter what EPA and the state EPA says. Remember, the state EPA were one of the ones who were indicted and being sued. And then the feds have been slow, notwithstanding the hearings, not just with my client, but they looked at this. in the Government Oversight Committee, and the feds have been slow, but they've allocated federal dollars to match those local dollars to relay every water pipe in the city. You ever been to Flint? While it doesn't have a huge population, it has a sizable landmass, including a number of the GM plants that have been closed, and there's no community development going on, just large swaths of concrete area where a factory used to be. And so it's going to take time. What does that mean politically? That means politically, whether it's Karen Weaver, who's been on this show to give us updates on several occasions under her leadership, and even Mayor-elect Neely, they're in a tough position. Yeah. Because you have widespread frustration, you have new leadership, but as Lauren says, if you can't get the dollars and you don't start to see this nuts and bolts laying of these new water pipes, which takes time. You literally have to dig up the old pipes and relay them. That's not going to take a year. That's going to take a decade.
Yeah.
And so whoever's leading that city, no matter how much money they get in, and they can tout it, and they've laid new water pipes over a third of the city, for example, or whatever the number is or will be, there's still going to be a sense of frustration on who's leading. I'd be surprised if Neely didn't get unseated in 4 years unless there's major progress, because people have to feel safe in their communities, and they don't feel safe or that their families are safe simply because of the water.
Yeah, but this is one of those things where I really feel like this is a federal government responsibility. And, you know, we've been waiting for Infrastructure Week.
And, you know,
where's Infrastructure Week?
And this is one of those extremely difficult conversations for everyone to have, because everyone's going to be inconvenienced. There are boil water alerts all over this country. Obviously, Flint's on a whole nother level.
Yeah.
But the country has to be rebuilt. Yeah. I mean, obviously from underground up, you still go through bridges, everything. It's just, and it's going to be extremely inconvenient, whether it's our generation or clearly the next one. But no one wants to deal with it. There's going to be a huge price tag. The deficit's already, you know where it is. It's going to continue to grow until we deal with these tax cuts. So it's a hard conversation, and no one wants to be the one to say, sorry, these streets are going to be dug up, and you're going to have to deal, you say 10 years, and whether
maybe more.
And the bridges are going to be closed. Memorial Bridge right here in Washington is it's a nightmare going past there now.
The infrastructure issue is a great bipartisan issue that will create jobs, revenue, and make us safer in this country.
Trump blew that one.
He
had a perfect opportunity.
He had an opportunity to do that.
But but that wasn't his
than
priority.
anything else.
You're right, but that wasn't his priority. His priority was to give a tax cut to his rich friends and to himself.
And build the wall.
And build the wall. Exactly. Build the wall.
And get to a multi-trillion-dollar deficit.
Absolutely, in
by
the process.
Blowing a hole.
So Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez sees the Latino vote as key to winning the 2020 presidential election, and not just in states with large Hispanic populations. In an interview with The Hill yesterday, Perez said that investing in Latino voters is electoral and a moral imperative. Trump, according to a poll released by Telemundo, appears to be holding relatively steady support among Latino voters compared to his performance in 2016. Now, I have to say, when I saw that story this morning, my head blew up. It blew up.
I felt it.
Did you?
That was another boom.
Because it was like a sonic boom, okay? Because here's where my frustration comes from whenever I hear that. I mean, let's just be very real about this, Mr. Perez. Let's be very real about this. The reality is people get confused when they see the population numbers of the Latino population, and then they want to extrapolate from there that this is this huge untapped voting potential that the Democrats just need to tap into. Let's disaggregate that a little bit. A large proportion cannot vote. Let's just be very brutally honest here, because they aren't U.S. citizens, so they cannot vote. Of the portion that can vote, maybe about half, of that particular portion, a lot of them don't vote. Latinos have an absurdly low turnout rate when it comes to actually getting to the polls. I think the last election, the last polls that I saw on that, and it was mentioned in that article, it was like under 30%, okay? Crazy low turnout rates. And so, but then of those who do turn out, you have at least a third that consistently vote Republican. And so when I'm thinking about where is your best dollar to be spent, which you might want to start raising more dollars, Mr. Perez. When you're talking about spending the dollars that you do have as a DNC in terms of really energizing the vote in the next election, it makes just gobs more sense, particularly in those states that we need to win, in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, where you have a Philadelphia, where you have a Detroit, right? Where you have a Milwaukee. It makes so much more sense to really focus on energizing and getting out, maximizing the black vote, which already naturally votes more than the Latino population. Even in the 2016 election, where our voter turnout went down, still about 60% of voters, black voters, actually voted. So we understand the importance of voting.
Voted Democrat,
and
overwhelmingly.
And we vote 90% plus Democrat. So if you're just talking about more bang for your buck, I don't want to hear this stuff about the best untapped resource. No, the best untapped resource is the lack of investment that you're putting in the black voter, who is the most likely demographic to actually get you into office. So that's what I wanted to say to Mr. Perez today.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, after that.
Well, it's everybody sort of fooling themselves into Hispanics are the biggest minority group in the United States. It's 16%.
Fastest growing.
Blacks are 12%. So hey, let's go. But you're right. There's two issues there that never seem to get fixed. Every time we talk about this, we talk about every election cycle it comes up. We hear the same thing. Barack Obama did his whole thing trying to court specifically Hispanic voters, and to some extent it worked. But then you look at the actual stats.
Right.
You look at the actual who is voting for who, and who is voting for who is not only are their numbers low with regard to actual turnout,
right,
but when it comes to voting for the Republican, they voted in droves for Trump, which was a big shock to everybody. And I remember talking to former Congressman Luis Gutierrez of Chicago about this, and he broke it down for me. Obviously, in every ethnic community, there are subgroups that do different things. So the Cubans do this, the Puerto Ricans do that. I get it. It's all good. But at the end of the day, I mean, the Democratic Party is putting this huge investment into outreach to the Hispanic voters and not getting the return on the investment, not getting the ROI, and they know for a fact, I don't care what anybody says, it all comes down to money. When you were doing outreach to black voters, you were paying black consultants. You were doing outreach to the black community organizers. You're going to the churches. You're going to the people who, we have a few consultants in Virginia where they are specializing in doing outreach to black churches, and seeing who can do that outreach correctly. That means you're paying those consultants and you're paying those people. That money's getting funneled into that. I don't care what anybody says. The Democratic Party has a problem
if they use black consultants.
Using black consultants.
They don't use black consultants.
And that is the reason why they do not center black voters, because it forces them to center black consultants. That's what I think it is. You guys talk to me about what you think it is.
3 years ago, they sent white consultants into the black community.
What they do is they pay white consultants, and the white consultants subcontract to black consultants a pittance compared to what they actually get paid for the black consultants to do all the work.
So, Doc, I'm going to take a small exception. I read the piece on that interview. From a leadership, having led a state party before, I read it a little differently. He was asked about the Latino vote and how important it was. And my take on his interview was he wasn't talking about the Latino vote to the detriment of any other group. It feels
I'm looking
like
at what
that.
he did. No, I'm not talking about what he's implying. I'm talking about their actual behavior.
I got you. But in that article, all the things that you raised as a detriment, that was discussed in that piece. And I think what Tom Perez, in the end, was talking about was that the Latino voters have been taken for granted. Yes, the 25% vote for GOP, but he was saying that they are an untapped resource, and we need to invest more to get the maximum out of the Latino vote, especially the Latino Democratic vote. That's not to the detriment of anyone, but the realities of what you two have described, he described as well, and said we got to do better with it.
Let me ask you this. When have you heard him center the black vote in that same way?
Well, I'm sure he has.
When have you seen it?
Didn't do an interview on it right now.
No, when have you seen it?
Some of that is the media problem.
He has no choice but to center on the black vote. He can't win without, okay, watch this. He can't win without the black vote. Can he win without the Latino vote, given those challenges? Yeah.
Well,
However,
if he's thinking about the Obama coalition, the answer is actually no. Okay. But unless you get a lot of young people out that typically don't vote.
What he's saying really is that we need that tent of Latino Democratic voters. We need to tap them. It's difficult. Some go Republican. It's a language barrier a lot of times. There's an immigration barrier. Got it. But what he's saying is that they could make the difference if we could tap them and get them out the vote.
And they've been talking about this for years.
And I don't have a problem. Well, I don't have a problem with him talking about that.
Right.
So long as he talks about it, he's not talking to the detriment of black Democratic voters who have made up the bulk of the Democratic vote, because white Americans, white voters, have never supported the Democratic Party and the presidential Democratic nominee in the last 25 years or more.
Absolutely.
Since Lyndon Baines Johnson.
They
haven't won.
The majority of white
men
voters.
and women.
So they've left the party.
Yeah.
So he certainly needs the black vote. And I think what he's saying is we could be even stronger if we tap into the Latino Democratic voter. That's what I said.
My reading was that was his priority. But your thoughts on it, Mike?
I'm sure he's under a lot of pressure from, as you mentioned, the vendors and the Latino political class.
Yep.
They're like, if you don't put us at the table, who will? And they know the numbers. Obviously, you said it was 16% on what the Latino population is?
Voted for Trump. I think
No,
25%.
I'm sorry.
In terms of
total
turnout?
Latino population.
16% of the population.
All right, so then you whittle that down to how many can vote. So let's say it's 8%. And then of that 8%, you got to whittle that down to what? 5%.
Right.
Most likely voters.
Or most likely voters. So obviously it's a small number, but the pressure he's probably getting is if you don't put us at the table and help create these vendors that were trained and understand how the politics system works and how the party apparatus works, because if that's the pressure he's under from his folks.
Right.
And no dissimilar that what my father kind of pressure he was under. However, he knew how to do it on his own.
Right.
He didn't need to feel the pressure. He knew he was going to do that.
Right.
And I'm not suggesting Chairman Perez wasn't going to do the same thing.
Right.
And that's the challenge. Is you have like if there's a labor chair. I don't want to make it about race. If there's a labor chair, labor is going to say we need more seats at the table because you're one of us.
That's right.
It's just the kind of politics.
Some of this
dynamic.
too is the money piece in terms of not so much Latino voters, but in politics where you get because this to me sort of reminds me of what happens with white women in terms of their coalition. They sit up there and vote 51% for Trump, and then all of their issues are prioritized. So NARAL, you know, all this. We're always hearing about NARAL and all these groups. Okay, fine, and then they vote 51%. It's like, but we're constantly talking about their issues, and then when you look at, you know, who supports you, who gets you over the line in so many states, who wins that election for that U.S. senator, it ends up being African Americans, you know. And so it amazes me. But some of this too, to your point, is that there is this big media organization asking him that question, right? Putting that pressure on, and you know. That's why we have Roland Martin Unfiltered, so we can like have these moments where we question these people and prioritize our issues.
Here's you point. I just want to continue a point that you made that I think is very important before we move on. You talk about the policy issue priorities, and that's another pet peeve of mine as it relates to this issue specifically. Not only are we not, as a community, getting the investments that we should to this party that's proportionate to what we give back to this party in terms of voting, but just in policy priority. You know, it's been very frustrating to me to watch all of the debates that we've had thus far. Now, this also, I think, has a lot to do with there is a media infrastructure in the Latino community, and I'm not going to begrudge them that. I think that's wonderful. But there's always like a Telemundo voter, journalist there who's asking questions that center the needs of the Latino community. I probably could count on one hand the number of questions that were asked or issues that were brought up in those debates that specifically deal with black issues. And then beyond the debates, when you just look at the degree to which this party seems to be all out and very vocal on raising issues that are critical and important to that constituency, I do not see anywhere near the level of passion
it's
around
media,
those specific issues that deal with their main bread and butter group that bought them there, and that would be us.
It's media and it's money. I mean, one of the biggest examples of this money is LGBT issues.
Oh, yeah.
So you have a 10% of the population, their stuff is always on at the front of the table. That's because they have that money piece there, they get the priority, they get their issues on the table because they know, and also they just know how to play politics really well.
Right.
And they're vocal,
frankly,
too.
Yeah.
Very vocal.
African American groups.
They make you.
Yeah,
They make
African
you do
American
what they
groups.
want them to do.
We always want to do this dance of, oh, our tax status is going to be messed up if we get involved in
Oh, Lord,
politics.
yeah.
We've got the NAACP and NUL that, oh, we're worried about this donor being pissed off. So a lot of this is our groups not being vocal, like these other groups tend to be
Yeah.
very
And
vocal.
not raising money.
We need to get
Because
out
these
of the
other
Seaport
groups are
prison.
smaller
and they're
and
not
money.
demanding change.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
we
right.
stayed at the inauguration
That's right.
for Obama.
That's right.
And never left the inauguration.
That's right.
You want a president to do something?
That's right.
You make that president
You
do it.
got
Black,
that
white,
right.
yellow, brown.
You got
That's right.
that right.
And another thing.
No, yeah, run along. So we're going to go to break, and then we'll be talking about Life Lux Live.
You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. All right, folks, that's my homeboy there, Gerald Albright, one of the folks performing at the Life Luxe Jazz Experience in Cabo, November 7th through 11th. I'm going to be there as well. Weekend-long event held at the Omnia Day Club in Los Cabos, nestled on the Sea of Cortez in Los Cabos, Mexico. Folks, it's going to be an amazing time over those 4 days. We're going to have lots of great food and drink and golf and spa, health and wellness, you name it. The second annual Life Luxe Jazz Experience. Of course, some great people, entertainers are going to be there. Comedian Mark Curry, Gerald Albright, Alex Bugnon, Raul Madon, Incognito, Pieces of a Dream, Kirk Whalum, Average White Band, Donnie McClurkin, Shalea, Roy Ayers, Tom Brown, Ronnie Laws, and Ernest Quarles. I'll be broadcasting Roland Martin Unfiltered for that Thursday and Friday there as well. And so we want you to be in the house. It's going to be a great time. Go to lifeluxejazz.com, LIFELUXEJAZZ.com for more information. Packages are going fast. You also want to book it soon so your airline tickets are not crazy high. So go to lifeluxejazz.com.
So Julie Briskman, the cyclist who lost her job after giving the middle finger to Trump's motorcade, has found a new one after running for local office and winning against a Republican supervisor in Loudoun County, Virginia. The district that she won just happens to include a Trump golf course. I think she's going to get the last laugh on that one. What do y'all think?
Definitely.
If only for effect.
Right.
That's a great picture. I
That
wish
is a great photo.
Somebody send me that picture so I can frame it and put it in my office.
Since she's
I
now
gotta tell you.
a supervisor, she can like give the golf property, the bird, every day.
And you know what's interesting about her winning in the picture, not just the golf course, is that was a natural picture. She didn't know the photographer.
Yeah.
There was a guy with a camera who was behind her. I can't remember what he was doing, but he just happened to take the picture. And he posted it on the internet because the limousines were going by, and she got the finger up. And the rest is, but one thing you got to say about her, too, she's been active in her community for 20 years. Mm-hmm. This is not new. First time she ran for office, but she's been at the local level. She's been active in politics and business and what have you. So she's not a political newcomer to Loudoun County politics. But when she got fired by the company, and she's a single mother of two, I think, she really got more active.
Yeah,
and then
good
she
for
decided
her.
to run for office to make a difference. So
Good for her.
great story.
Iconic.
Yeah, just iconic. Yeah.
So
Good
following
for her.
up, absolutely. So following up on a story we brought to you yesterday, Kansas City voters overwhelmingly approved removing Dr. Martin Luther King's name from one of the city's most historic boulevards yesterday. The decision comes less than a year after the city council decided to rename the street, which had been known as the Paseo. Unofficial results showed the proposal to remove King's name received nearly 70% of the vote, with just over 30% voting to retain King's name. I mean, you know, every major city has some sort of Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. We all know that. We all kind of have certain ideas, like that's where you can find the hood, right? But, you know, in this particular instance, you know, it's interesting that they actually put it up to the vote, and then people said, "Hey, let's change it." Is this like a byproduct of gentrification? I mean, what exactly happened here?
Who knows? I mean, I do think that local communities do have the right to, control what they want to do in terms of naming these things. And as somebody who's been in the media and in government for over 20 years, I have to say that one of the things that I see increasingly, and I'm sure it had been going on before I came along the scene, is to appease black communities, a lot of times they want to do a monument or a street renaming.
Yep.
What I find is that that is not particularly relevant, but it's important, it's cool. We have the Obama High School. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these things. Somebody who's from New York, Malcolm X Boulevard. Yep. I mean, it's all good. It's all good, but it's become the substitute of real action. Yeah. It's become the substitute of, and so everybody goes to the groundbreaking or the unveiling, and then everybody's appeased. But to me, and I know I've brought it up several times, I guess this is the money episode for me. If it doesn't involve money, I am not particularly interested. But, it is weird that this happened.
You sound like a capitalist.
That's right, to happen. Yeah, I am a capitalist.
You sound like
I'm a capitalist, and because I just feel like it is a symbolic thing that, I mean, it's a symbolic thing. One of the fights we have in Virginia all the time is about monuments.
Right.
God, monuments.
Yes.
So it's not something that, of course, it's important, but, if you want to talk about monuments, we have monuments to Jim Crow, like the school system in Richmond. Let's talk about monuments, right? But the real change is the thing that nobody wants to talk about. They want to rename a street or put up a statue and,
they don't want to talk about redistribution of wealth.
Right.
They don't want to talk about redistribution of wealth. Now, hold on, Willis. Hold on, Willis.
So anyway,
Don't you see this pretty sign?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I've read the piece. I don't know enough about the Kansas neighborhood, but I do think the community in that neighborhood, in those neighborhoods, felt strongly about the naming of that street, the Paseo, and it had been that name for several decades. And the Martin Luther King name was new. I don't know what the racial makeup is, but I can tell you right now, if it's majority white, let me tell you something. Most white voters, slavery, Jim Crow, the civil rights movement was a long time ago, right? They've been criticized and paid their dues. I'm reporting on what I've learned over the years. I don't agree with it, and they're tired of being blamed for the plight and the struggle that Martin Luther King went through. They obviously honor him with a holiday and all these other things, but I think the traditionalists in those neighborhoods decided that the fact that they wanted their name back didn't make them racist or racially insensitive, and that they honor Martin Luther King in a lot of other ways, but people felt strongly about the name of this street. That's what I think. Yeah. And I'm a Democrat, by the way.
Okay.
All right.
I'm sure there was gentrification. Maybe there are a lot of different layers, a lot of different reasons, but it's wrong. I mean, the symbolism is also not just for us and pride. It's for young white folks to see it too, so they grow up knowing that their leaders aren't just the ones that they are taught in the history books. Oh, Martin Luther King, wow, he's on my street, or I go past this street. So I think the symbolism is important without getting too into the weeds about it. So I think it was the wrong thing to do, and consequences of gentrification.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they can also rename another street. I wouldn't give up the fight.
Right, correct.
There are lots of streets in Kansas City, and remember, it's not a non-liberal city. They've got the Negro Baseball Historical Society there, with the museum.
They got a member of Congress.
Right, exactly. They got CBC members. So I think they need to work through that with that community and other communities to get that done, because the power of that name and the power of Martin Luther King and what he stood for all people, right? And made this country better. That is powerful. So there should be a street named in his honor.
But if you were that city, you wouldn't want to be named for that. I mean, we're talking about it. I mean, that's just not, I don't think that's a good look.
Yeah. At minimum, it's bad PR.
Right.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
So that concludes today's show. Thanks to Scott, Lauren, and Michael. Roland will be back tomorrow broadcasting live from Cabo at the live Luxe Jazz Festival. Somehow he didn't bring us with him. I don't know why not. So this show needs
I would have flown coach.
I don't know about all that, but
I would have flown coach to go.
This show needs your support to continue. All you have to do is go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com and join the Bring the Funk fan club. Until next week, I'll see you then. Dr. Avis is here. Holla.
You want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered? YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. See that name right there? Roland Martin Unfiltered. Like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's YouTube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications so when we go live, you'll know it. You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Hey fam, want to check out Roland Martin Unfiltered, the blackest show on all of digital, cable, and broadcast. Check out our audio podcast. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. It's Roland Martin Unfiltered. Press play.
Hey everybody, this is Sherry Shepherd. You're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered, and while he's doing Unfiltered, I'm practicing the wobble. Yes, I am. Because Roland Martin's the one, he will do it backwards, he will do it on the side. He messes everybody up when he gets into the wobble, because he doesn't know how to do it, so he does it backwards. And it messes me up every single time. So I'm working on it. I got it. You got Roland Martin.
Hi, my name is LaToya Luckett, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Mac Wiles, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What's up, y'all? It's Ryan Destiny, and you're watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.
What up, Lana Well, and you are watching Roland Martin Unfiltered.